Final play heroics was the theme of Week 2 in area football. We have all the top stories right here on the Varsity 360 Gridiron Report. You know when it starts, right now. Hi there everyone, Mark Coleman here from D2SN. Welcome to the Week 2 installment of Varsity 360's Gridiron Report, our weekly look at the top stories in Fredericksburg area high school football. Very happy to be partnered with the great folks from the Freelance Star. Very honored and privileged to be joined by one of my very favorite members of the FLS Varsity crew. He is the most talented sports editor that I know. He is the pride of the Freelance Star. It is Mr. Justin Rice. Justin. You don't disagree, do you?
Everything this man says is true.
I'm not sure. Everything I recently said was true. Let's just
Fair
go
enough.
with that. Well, certainly happy to be able to spend another week chatting high school football
Absolutely.
with you.
Glad to be here, Mark.
You know, I want to take just a moment, just an aside here, if I might, and put out a plea, I guess, for some stories that we can air on the Gridiron Report here. And I'm really looking for some stories that focus on good sportsmanship. There's been some unsavory stories, particularly in high school sports, fortunately not from the area lately. I think I'd like to try to do my part to make something go viral in a good way from Fredericksburg area high school football. Does that sound like
sounds like a good idea, Mark.
A noble cause, I guess. So here's my plea to you. Please let me know some good stories about good happenings in terms of sportsmanship around the area. It could be players, it could be coaches, it could be parents, it could just be fans that are watching, it could be from your team, it could be from the opposition. It doesn't matter. Tweet me at Mark Coleman V2SN. Let me know those good stories. Would love to be able to get them on the air, maybe even have you in studio and talk about it a little bit. So let's see if we can come up with some good stories and do some good things around here. Sounds good? Yeah. Sounds good. Well, let's jump into our recap of Week 2 games. Well, late game heroics certainly was the theme from this past week, and I don't think that there was anything that got a whole lot more exciting than this Colonial Forge North Stafford matchup. Lots of points scored right down to the wire here, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was following the game along Twitter at FLSvarsity.com. I was following the game from the game I was covering. And, you know, Colonial Forge jumped up 27-8 in the first quarter. And I told myself, I think North Stafford comes back and makes a game out of this. What do you know they do? They take the lead with 3 minutes and 11 seconds left. D. Curtis Davis with an 89-yard touchdown reception from Jimmy Edwards to give North Stafford the lead. Colonial Forge marches right back down the field. Jadon Redding, 32-yard field goal with just 5.7 seconds left to deliver the win to the Eagles. 2 games, maybe our prime games now in back-to-back weeks decided by a field goal in the last couple seconds. Massaponax and Cortland in Week 1.
Yeah, almost shocking the way that it's played out. A lot of back and forth. Final score 43-41 in this game. So a 4th down conversion, I believe, and a 3rd and long conversion on that final drive from Forge to pull it off. But man, what a barn burner. I was also following it from the game that I was at, following it on at FLS Varsity. Make sure if you don't already follow them on Twitter, at FLS Varsity is certainly a handle. I guess it's not just a person. It's you and a number of other. So you guys are tweeting from a number of different locations.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Nathan Mortis was actually at the North Stafford game. Got to see Antonio McCray score 5 touchdowns for Colonial Forge.
All in the first half.
All as they race out to the big league.
Quarter.
And McCray, of course, is the guy we talked about with Bill Brown. We talked about McCray in the preseason, about a guy coming forward. Devin Ford from North Stafford with another big game, 14 carries for 100 yards. Wolverines spreading it out a little bit. He's not the only guy touching it. Nakeem Mortons has already returned 3 kicks for touchdowns this year. We're 2 games in. This week's was a 99-yarder.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, unbelievable game. And a lot of offense. These 2 teams look pretty solid. Especially Colonial Forge, as young as we thought they might be. That's a good 2-0 start.
It is a very good 2-0 start, and they certainly have impressed thus far. So they moved to 2-0. North Stafford falls to 1-1, but still looks strong. This is a very talented team, particularly offensively. Defense certainly wasn't showcased in this one, but 2 strong teams. Stafford County matchup, rivalry game. I don't think anyone left the game without their nerves frazzled, either on the winning or the losing side there. So Forge comes away with a victory. Another game, another close ending. This one went to overtime between Spotsylvania and Fluvanna. A little bit of a different situation here. There was a touchdown scored by Fluvanna. Their two-point conversion attempt failed. Spotsy comes back with their own touchdown. Francisco Umanzor, in only his second varsity football game, kicks the game-winning extra point for Spotsy. They come away with a 29-28 overtime victory.
And didn't have any chances in the first game against Eastern View. He did
right.
not. So this is really his first big try, first pressure moment. That's a great win. Michael Janello from Spotsylvania scored the overtime touchdown. And, of course, Michael Shelton from Spotsylvania, who I saw against Eastern View, hard runner. You know, he's the middle guy in that wing T attack. He's going to get a lot of touches. This week, 31 carries, 215 yards, 3 touchdowns, including the one to tie it up and the two-point conversion run late in the fourth quarter to tie it up for the Knights to force overtime. You know, Shelton with a real big game, and that's a good 3A East win for Spotsylvania.
Yeah, how about these Knights? So they're getting back on the right side of the win column and putting together a team that's certainly competitive, if not even better along the way. So it's exciting to see that.
Well, certainly, and you still think Spotsylvania is, of course, a step or 4 behind Cortland and maybe Chancellor and maybe JM. But then there are other teams on Spotsy's schedule who you look at and go, if the Knights play well and they play that disciplined wing tee, grind it out style, hand the ball to Shelton a lot, and stay in games with defense, you certainly like their chances to maybe come up, win 4, win 5, and be in the playoffs at the end of the year.
There you go. Overtime victory for Spotsy, 29-28 over Fluvanna. Spotsylvania County matchup between Massaponax and Chancellor. This one wasn't quite as close as some of the other games that we saw this week. Ponax comes away with a big 42-19 victory. A lot of rushing yards from the Panthers.
And it's sort of a classic Massaponax rushing line. 11 different ball carriers, 47 carries for 493 yards. Of course, Trey Watkins with 7 for 126. Joey Bennett gets into the act, 5 for 104, a couple touchdowns, also threw a touchdown. It's sort of classic, Massaponax. I wonder, the question I have is, week 1, Cortland sort of limits them a little bit. Of course, they win the game. Was Cortland's defense that much better than Chancellor's defense, or did Massaponax figure things out in week 2?
I suspect it was a little bit of both. I think that this team still has some youth in certain areas. Coach Ledden was talking about that during the preview. I suspect that they worked on some of the more fundamentals and mechanics in week 1, and that it showed in the week 2 performance.
And Mario Wisdom with Chancellor, got to mention him.
Rushers.
19 carries for 160 yards and a touchdown. I think one of the notable stats is, of course, Massaponax held Jason Brown, the Chancellor quarterback, to 97 passing yards. He does get 2 scores in there. But it's a pretty good job by the Panthers defense against a pretty good Chancellor offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Ponax with the 42-19 victory over Chancellor. Another week 2 game that came down to a close score at least. Cortland Cougars coming away with a 7-6 close victory over Riverbend. A rather sloppy game here.
And you saw this one firsthand.
I did.
Mark, what's your impression of the Cortland offense at this point? They scored 14 points in the first half against Massaponax. They scored 7 in the fourth quarter to pull this one out. What's your perception? Do you feel like they're moving well, or what's stopping Cortland? Do you feel like?
Turnovers were certainly the issue against Riverbend this past week. I'm sure Coach Hall is going to be probably instituting some new practice regime here to try to combat that. 6 turnovers by Cortland in this game. They racked up the yardage. Blair Lawson looked darn near unstoppable. 10 carries for 104 yards. George Cheatham, 13 carries, 113 yards. He had the lone touchdown in the game, but there was a number of turnovers. Some of them were forced, and some of them were just not taking care of the ball, quite honestly.
Yes.
So it is sort of alarming to me to see such low point outputs from such a powerful Cortland team.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, maybe Riverbend has played good defense, and they've turned it around. I know they got a good effort from Lorenzo Dorr on the offense, 23 carries for 116 yards. They take the air. They got 6-0 lead most of the game. I think that's, if you had asked Coach DeMarco before the game, look, you're going to hold Cortland to 0 points for 3 quarters. Are you going to win the game? He probably says yes.
Probably so, and they almost were able to pull it away. It was not until maybe midway through the fourth quarter that Cortland finally was able. They got a turnover of their own and were able to punch it in for a touchdown. And that sort of from there, for the next 6 minutes or so, they were able to dominate pretty well. Concerns for Riverbend, so they lost Orlando Jones, their star running back. I think it was the second play of the game, so Lorenzo Dorr did the bulk of the carries for Riverbend. Orlando Jones is a linebacker as well, so when you lose these players, and I don't know what the nature of the injury, it was a lower extremity injury, have no idea how serious. He did not return for the game. It's like losing 2 players, though. When you lose a starter, that goes both ways. That's tough.
Well, I think Coach DeMarco said to us that depth was not a particular strength of this Riverbend team. So they're going to have to find other guys to step in there. Bears are 0-2, and but we knew this coming in, that the schedule was very difficult, and they're going to have to find wins. They
are going to have to find wins. It doesn't get any easier next week. We'll get to that in just a moment, though. How about that? Cortland with a 7-6 victory over Riverbend. Eastern View took on Orange this past week, a game that also was not all that close, 34-2 the final score. The Cyclones with a dominating performance. They just keep rolling. Yeah, and they fall behind early, 2-0 right off the bat, and then roll off 34 answered. I think if you talk to Greg Hatfield, I think he is probably really happy to be 2-0, but this one's probably not as pretty as they like. The 2 teams combined for 7 fumbles, 2 of them get lost. They combine for 3 interceptions. They combine for 22 penalties. So Eastern View cruises. It's 34-2, but I'm sure not in the fashion they want. Josh Stallings has to pick up. They lose their running back, whose name? Justin Pollard is injured. Is injured. Yeah, exactly. And they get Montez Orange, has 5 carries for 45 yards, but Stallings ends up leading them in rushing with 19 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also throws a touchdown passing. This is going to be Josh Stallings' year sort of to carry the Cyclones. It's shaping up that way, certainly. TJ Johnson with a good game for Eastern View. An interception return for a touchdown, and he was on the receiving end of that touchdown pass from Stallings as well. So Eastern View defeats Orange 34-2. Another rather close game for week 2. James Monroe with their home opener taking on York. Comes down to late game again. JM comes away with a 16-9 victory. Yeah, the Jackets sort of did really well moving the ball from the 20 to the 20 all night. They just got into the red zone and couldn't quite finish drives, whether it was a missed block on a key play or a turnover at the end of a drive or a penalty. They just couldn't quite punch it in. It felt like they were in control of this game the whole time. And then York scores late, kicks field goal to tie the game up 9-9, and then of course JM responds by handing the ball to DJ Weldon a bunch, 21 carries for 149 yards, drives him right down the field. Drajon Boley, basketball standout, all-area basketball type, catches a pretty key 4th down pass from A.J. Felton, and the Jackets roll in and do enough to hang on. Look really good at times, less good at other times. I think though it's a good win for the Jackets to sort of get back on top after falling to Dinwiddie in their opener. Right. So JM evens their record. They're getting some good performance from some newcomers. Yeah, and I think importantly they've had 2 straight weeks of 300-yard rushing as a team. Besides Weldon, A.J. Felton, they got 11 carries for 106 yards. He had a real nice game. They've got to find the pass. They definitely have got to look for that. I know York stacked the box. There was a stretch in the game where York had all 11 guys within 7 yards of the line of scrimmage. Teams are going to want to see JM sort of stretch the ball a little bit. How did JM's defense look? I mean, they got torched pretty well last week against a very strong Dinwiddie team. Held York to 9 this week. Is the defense stepping up? I know the competition was not quite the same either. Yeah, I think they played well at times. They still, I think, they need to work on their approach to the physical game, I think, is where it's at. And I think that's what JM probably feels like, is they've got to make sure they're tough. And against those teams that are just the downhill running, come right at you, big offensive lineman teams, those are the teams JM needs to make sure they can slow down. Certainly held York to 9 points, and it was 6 until the very end. You gave up 1 touchdown very early in the game, you gave up a field goal very late. As JM finishes some of their drives in between, this game's not even close. So JM comes away with the 16-9 victory over York. Let's take a quick look at other games around the area from week 2 and start with Mountain View. Boy, they've put up some numbers here lately. Mountain View with the 49-14 victory over Osborne Park. Pretty impressive rushing performance there as well. Yeah, and Jameel Collison-Coffey with 112 yards, 2 touchdowns rushing, 68 yards receiving, 2 more touchdowns that way. 4 touchdowns, had 5 touchdowns last week, 9 touchdowns in 2 weeks. Jameel Collison-Coffey, your freelance star player of the week. How about that? Congratulations to Jameel. 9 touchdowns over 2 weeks. Of course, it was just the week 2 performance that earns him the recognition for this past week. Ahmad Tweedy, the quarterback for Mountain View, with 2 more touchdowns rushing, and he threw 2 touchdown passes as well. Well, they piled it on there.
Yeah, Wildcats certainly pouring on the points against the Prince William County teams. Whoa, that was a mouthful.
Lots of alliteration in that sentence. I had to think about what the word was, and I remembered. Yay for me. Brook Point with a 39-0 victory over Stonewall Jackson. Damone Drew with a big performance here.
Yeah, 5 touchdowns. Brook Point bounces back from the opener loss to Forge and gets on the board with the win. Brook Point, I'm telling you, improved this year, much improved this year.
I'm starting to make you're starting to make a believer of me. Yeah, and Drew with an outstanding performance,
Sure.
5 touchdowns rushing the ball. Colonial Beach, the hard luck loser they played a really tough game last week. Randolph Henry with 46-38 victory over Colonial Beach this past week. Not without the help of Lamar Lucas.
Yeah, Lamar Lucas with a big game, and the Beaches certainly has time to get this thing going. And the first opponent, Avalon, was very tough, very talented. Clearly, Randolph Henry a good team as well. The Beach has got some learning to do.
Lucas with 165 yards rushing in that game. Alonzo Turner also had a touchdown rushing and 2 touchdowns throwing the ball. Patrick Henry with a big 68-34 victory over Caroline. Caroline put up some numbers there, though.
Yeah, I mean, 2 teams combined for 102 points. You're going to put up some run numbers. David Ware, 35 attempts, 18 completions, 214 yards, 3 touchdowns, 192 yards to Brandon Williams. That's a heck of a performance. That's one of the best offensive performances for Caroline in the last several years.
That's very impressive. 7 receptions for Williams, and 2 of those go for scores. And then finally, Stafford really fell behind early in this game against Woodbridge. Woodbridge with the 43-6 victory over the Indians. Stafford, after what looked to be a strong performance in week 1, week 2, I'm sure that they're very anxious to get to week 3.
Absolutely, that's a Division 6 opponent for Stafford there. That maybe a little less painful. I'm sure the Indians are looking for a win.
How about we take a quick look at some of the games coming up on week 3? We've got a full slate of games, of course. Justin, which of these games looks intriguing to you?
I think I look at Culpeper at Spotsylvania, and people go, Culpeper at Spotsylvania. But yeah, Culpeper's 0-1. Spotsylvania is, of course, 1-1. Knights coming off the win against Fluvanna. Culpeper fell to Orange in their opener. But this is an important game in the 3A East. These are 2 teams that I think can be more competitive this year, but they're definitely going to be fighting for wins and, fighting to stay in sort of that top half, or the bottom half of the playoff teams in the 3A East. So the one that gets a win here, big advantage. I think Culpeper throwing it up and down the field, Spotsylvania running that wing T, whoever controls the pace. Low scoring game, you like Spotsylvania. High scoring game, you like Culpeper. And I think that's it should be a pretty entertaining game.
That's a good choice. You interested in what I?
What would you? I suppose so.
We're following the script here, right?
Yeah.
I like the Eastern View Chancellor game. I think this is going to be an interesting matchup of teams that are sort of converging on similar skills, I guess. So Chancellor 1-1, Eastern View 2-0. Eastern View's probably been outclassing their competition. They're stepping it up a bit, I would dare say, against Chancellor. Meanwhile, Chancellor has faced a 6A Riverbend team and won. A very strong 5A Ponax team. Didn't win, but we're competitive with them at least. I'm curious to see how this Chancellor team fares against Eastern View, and likewise how Eastern View, with potentially some injury problems, can compete with Chancellor. I think it's going to be an interesting game.
I think you're right. If we had one of those fancy graphics up there and we talked about who you give the edge to, I think strength of schedule, certainly you look at who Chancellor's played versus who Eastern View has played. Quarterbacks, Josh Stallings, Jason Brown. That's a tough matchup. They've got weapons. Chancellor's got wisdom. Eastern View, are they going to have Pollard? We'll see, of course. And they got Diego there, Diego Hunter playing the receiver. They both have weapons. They both have good quarterbacks. High scoring game. High scoring game. Yeah, absolutely.
That game is at Chancellor, so if you're in the area, I think that would be a good game to.
That's going to be an entertaining and maybe long, high scoring game.
I think so. A couple of county rivalries going on this weekend as well.
Yeah, in Stafford County, of course, you have Stafford and Colonial Forge, and in Spotsylvania, you have Riverbend and Massaponax. These 2 actually kind of parallel each other nicely. Stafford and Riverbend, both 0-2. Ponax and Forge, both 2-0. So you've got 2 sort of rivalries where the underdog or maybe the less favored team is looking to reach up and surprise somebody and maybe get their season back on track.
Yeah, and when you get those county rivalries, you can oftentimes throw the record out the window. I mean, these are teams that know each other quite well, so those types of games lend themselves well to a well-played game.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. If Forge has got so many offensive weapons. Stafford's going to have a tough battle ahead, and of course Massaponax with all those 11 guys touching the ball last week. Riverbend's got a tough battle ahead. Those are two very good games, and we'll see who comes out on top.
Sounds like there's, not surprisingly, a lot of good high school football on the docket for this.
It's only weekend. Week 3. It's only week 3. Yeah.
It's already week 3. Also, though, just depends on which side of the coin you want to look at.
Absolutely.
Lots of great games. Hopefully, you've got a favorite team or two, and you can get out and see a very good Fredericksburg area high school football game this weekend. That is going to do it for this week's installment of the Varsity 360 Gridiron Report. As always, I am very pleased to have been joined by my good friend. Happy to say he's my good friend. I hope that I'm accurate in saying.
I think so. Let's spend a Friday together one of these nights.
Deal.
All right.
Deal. Justin Rice. He's a good guy. Assistant sports editor for the Freelance Star. And, all-around good guy. Appreciate the time, buddy.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, that's going to do it on behalf of the good folks from the V2SN team. My name is Mark Coleman. Thanks so much for watching.